There's a reason this situation has people talking right now, and it's not just because somebody showed up on television. It's deeper than that, and if you've been paying close attention, then you already understand that this moment didn't just happen out of nowhere. It carries weight, it carries timing, and more importantly, it carries a message that a lot of people are just now starting to pick up on. For a long time, one question has been floating around in conversations, comments, and discussions. When is Arionne actually going to appear on the network in a real way? Not hinted at, not blurred out, not spoken about indirectly, but actually appear with a clear role and a defined presence. That question has stayed unanswered for a while now, and the longer it goes unanswered, the more noticeable the silence becomes. But while people are still waiting for that moment to happen, something else has already taken place, and it changes the entire conversation in a way that cannot be ignored. Because recently, viewers noticed something very specific, something that immediately stood out once it was seen. During an episode of a new show airing on the OWN network, what started off as a normal social scene quickly turned into something much more significant. It was a couples gathering, the kind of setting that reality television uses to highlight personalities, relationships, and interactions in a natural environment. Everything looked routine at first glance, people talking, laughing, engaging in games, enjoying the moment. But then, as the camera moved and scenes unfolded, a familiar face appeared, and that's when everything shifted. Because standing there clearly visible and fully present was someone directly connected to Arionne's personal life. Not just loosely connected, not someone from a distance, but someone who shares real history with her. That person was Tori, her first child's father, and his presence alone immediately raised questions that people could not ignore. Now this wasn't a quick background appearance where someone passes by unnoticed. This was repeated visibility. He was shown multiple times, actively participating in the event, interacting with others, and engaging in the kind of moments that reality television tends to highlight. One of the key moments involved a game that couples were playing together, something simple on the surface, but meaningful in terms of screen presence. Tori didn't just participate in that moment, he stood out in it. He played, he engaged, and he ended up winning alongside his partner. That moment alone placed him in a position of visibility that goes beyond coincidence, because reality television is built on moments like that. Those are the scenes that stay in the final cut. Those are the scenes that viewers remember. Those are the scenes that introduce people to an audience without needing a formal introduction. And standing right beside him was a woman believed to be his wife, celebrating with him, sharing that moment, smiling, high-fiving, presenting a picture that looked stable, clear, and fully formed. And that image is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Because while one side is being shown as present, defined, and easy to understand, the other side remains uncertain, undefined, and absent from the same space. That contrast is what makes this moment bigger than it might seem at first glance. It shifts the focus from simple curiosity to something more analytical. It forces people to ask not just what is happening, but why it is happening this way. Because if someone so closely connected to Arionne can appear on the network without hesitation, without confusion, and without delay, then the question becomes even more direct. What is preventing her from doing the same? And that's where the conversation starts to move into deeper territory, because the answer may not be as simple as access or opportunity. Part of the issue may come down to consistency or the lack of it. Over time, the way Arionne has been described, presented, and understood has shifted more than once. One day the narrative around her is one thing, and the next day it becomes something else. Labels change, roles change, and the story itself seems to move depending on the moment. And while that might not seem like a major issue on the surface, in the world of reality television, it matters a lot. Because networks don't just put people on screen randomly. They build structured narratives, they create clear roles, they develop storylines that audiences can follow without confusion. And when a person's place within that structure is unclear, it becomes difficult to introduce them in a way that feels complete and intentional. That kind of uncertainty can create hesitation, not just for viewers, but for the people making decisions behind the scenes. And then there's another layer to this situation that adds even more complexity. There have been claims circulating, alleged but widely discussed, that the event space where this gathering took place may actually belong to Tori himself. If that detail holds any truth, then it changes the entire context of his appearance. Because that would mean he wasn't just there as a guest. He may have had a role in providing the setting itself. And if that's the case, then his presence becomes even more understandable. It places him in a position where being on camera is not just about being invited, but about being part of the environment that made the filming possible. Ownership or even partial involvement in the setup naturally creates visibility, and that kind of positioning can open doors that might not be available otherwise. Even if the claim is not fully confirmed, the perception alone is enough to influence how people interpret what they saw. At the same time, there have also been ongoing reports suggesting that Arionne may have been told she would not be appearing on certain shows, with reasons tied to behavior, presentation, or not aligning with the direction that producers want to take. Whether those reports are entirely accurate or not, they align with the current situation in a way that cannot be ignored. Because when you look at what is actually happening, the pattern becomes clear. She is not being shown, not being introduced, and not being placed into the structure that the network is building. Meanwhile, someone connected to her is already present within that same structure. That contrast creates a narrative of its own, one that viewers are beginning to recognize without needing it to be explained directly. What makes this moment even more significant is the timing. The show where this appearance took place is still new. It is still developing its identity, introducing its cast, and shaping its direction. In a stage like that, every decision matters. Every person who appears on screen is part of building the foundation of what the show will become. So when someone like Tori is shown clearly and repeatedly within that early phase, it suggests that his presence was not random. It was a choice. And choices like that are usually made with intention. They serve a purpose, even if that purpose is not immediately obvious to the audience. As viewers continue to watch and analyze these moments, the conversation will naturally evolve. It will move from surprise to speculation, and from speculation to expectation. People will start looking more closely at who appears, how they are presented, and what that might mean for future episodes. Because in reality television, patterns often reveal more than direct statements. And right now, the pattern suggests that access to the screen is being carefully controlled, with certain individuals being positioned in ways that align with the direction of the show, while others remain outside of that frame. This is why the moment matters as much as it does. It's not just about one appearance in one episode. It's about what that appearance represents. It shows that the door is not completely closed, but it is selective. It shows that connections alone are not enough to guarantee a place on screen. And it shows that timing, positioning, and perception all play a role in determining who gets seen and who does not. For Arionne, this creates a situation where her absence becomes just as noticeable as someone else's presence. And in some ways, even more so. Because when people expect to see someone and they don't, that absence creates its own kind of attention. It leads to questions, discussions, and ongoing curiosity. And when that absence is contrasted with someone else stepping into the space she was expected to occupy, it amplifies the impact even further. It turns a simple moment into a larger narrative, one that continues to develop with each new episode and each new detail that comes to light. Moving forward, everything depends on what happens next. Will this moment lead to new opportunities, new introductions, or new developments in the storyline? Or will it remain a standalone example of how quickly things can shift in this environment? Because in reality television, momentum matters. Once a certain direction is established, it can be difficult to change it without a clear reason. And right now, the direction seems to be moving forward without her involvement. That doesn't necessarily mean the situation is permanent, but it does mean that the longer it continues, the more defined it becomes. And the more defined it becomes, the harder it is to alter. For viewers, this creates a sense of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. They are watching closely, not just for what is happening, but for what might happen next. And that kind of attention is what keeps the conversation alive. At the end of the day, what we are seeing is a clear example of how visibility works in this space. It's not always about who is most talked about or most connected. It's about who fits into the structure that is being built at a specific moment in time. And right now, that structure includes people who are already stepping into the spotlight, while leaving others on the outside looking in. So the question remains, and it's one that only time will answer. Will Arionne eventually step into that space and become part of the narrative in a visible, defined way? Or will moments like this continue to highlight the gap between expectation and reality? Because one thing is certain, people are paying attention now more than ever. And every appearance, every absence, every detail is being noticed, discussed, and analyzed. And in a situation like this, where perception can shape reality just as much as facts, that attention can make all the difference. Because once the audience starts asking questions, those questions don't just disappear. They build, they grow, and they eventually demand answers. Whether those answers come directly or indirectly, through actions or through silence, remains to be seen. But for now, the message is clear enough for people to understand. Someone connected to Arionne has already stepped into the spotlight on the network. They were visible, they were involved, and they were part of the moment, and she wasn't. That contrast alone is enough to keep this conversation going, because it represents more than just a single appearance. It represents a shift, a decision, and a direction that is still unfolding in real time. And as long as that direction continues, people will keep watching, keep questioning, and keep trying to understand exactly what it all means.